Theo Greminger and I are back with bold predictions for fantasy football week 10 and the full NFL season, and a little bit looking at 2025, the 2025 NFL draft. There's a lot to talk about. We're digging into Chuba Hubbard. Jonathan Brooks still on the IR. He's on a team that has no incentive to win, has no incentive to feed him significantly. And Chuba Hubbard has all the incentive to put up big stats to earn a big contract next year. For the rest of the way, I see Chuba Hubbard as a top 15 running back in fantasy football. He is already top 10 in weighted opportunities. Weighted opportunities puts a premium on targets because he's top 10 in running back targets in the NFL. Did you know that? I didn't think so. This will all eventually lead to Chuba Hubbard putting up a big, impressive 1,000-yard season and going on to be the highest paid running back in free agency in 2025.
I love it, Matt. And it's sort of like Chuba Hubbard is averaging 15 points per game right now. And the only thing that's holding Chuba Hubbard back from being like a guy where people are really talking about him as like a league-winning value at running back is the fact that he's on a terrible offense. But he's been able to overcome it with incredible efficiency, and the usage is remarkable. And I agree with you. I think that he's going to be an attractive candidate for multiple teams this offseason because of his relative youth and his efficiency at the position. My call is actually about a player playing in the exact same game as Chuba Hubbard, and that's Malik Nabers. Now, Malik Nabers, we've sort of been waiting, Matt. This is one where he started out where it was incredible. He had the 28-pointer, the 28-pointer, the 23-pointer, and then the concussion happens, and it took him a while to get back on the field. And ever since he's come back, the metrics have been there for him to succeed, but it just simply hasn't been there. You've had a 95% snap rate. You've talked about a player getting an exceptional target share, and the raw target totals over the past 2 weeks, 24 of them. He scored 14.1 points and 14.9 points. Now they go overseas. They play the early window game where the entire country is going to be watching Carolina, New York. And this is one where it's like, why am I waking up to see these two bad teams? And then all of a sudden, you're going to see Malik Nabers take over. Malik Nabers is going to score 27 PPR points. He's not going to get his season high, but he's going to come close to it. He's going to score a touchdown. He's going to go over 130 receiving yards, which will be a season high for him in the receiving yards category. And the narrative is going to go right back to Malik Nabers is a top 5 wide receiver for the rest of the season after this week.
I agree with all of that. Malik Nabers to the moon. I'm going to keep this one simple. Super simple. You want production at the tight end position? Taysom Hill. Taysom Hill at home against Atlanta. The game total is 46.5. So Vegas thinks that the Saints are going to score some points. How are the Saints scoring points right now? Again, we're keeping it simple. When the Saints get into the red zone, what are they doing? They're calling the Wildcat, and they're just giving the ball to Taysom Hill. It's hard to score fantasy points from the tight end position because you have to block, then you have to go out in a route, and a lot can go wrong. It's a lot easier if they just snap the ball to you directly and you go run for a touchdown. Easy fantasy points for Taysom Hill, and he will be, because there's no one else left other than Alvin Kamara in that Saints offense, he will be a top 10 tight end the rest of the way. Go get Taysom Hill.
Yeah, and I think this is one where the only argument that I've seen against Taysom Hill this week is the coaching change, which is sort of like such a weird one. They simply don't have the bodies not to utilize Taysom Hill. So what do they do when their backs are against the wall? They go with Taysom Hill. It's going to be a ton of Alvin Kamara and a ton of Taysom Hill. I love that call. And in leagues where he's tight end eligible, I agree with you. I think he's going to make a huge impact. For me, I love looking at players coming out of their bye week. I think a lot of times the smart teams have times to assess what's working and self-scout. And at the same time, they have a chance to get healthy. And with Brock Purdy You have Brock Purdy coming out of his bye week. And Matt, this is one where Brock Purdy is a QB1 right now, but he's a low-end QB1 and not a player that like we're that excited for. He has only 1 week with over 300 passing yards. I think he gets another one this week. Tampa Bay went tooth and nail with the Kansas City Chiefs, really played well. But now you have Tampa Bay has to play the San Francisco 49ers, who are really in must-win category coming out of their bye week. And now they have to play them on a short week. Tampa Bay has been very generous to opposing quarterbacks. We just saw Patrick Mahomes pass for 3 touchdowns in a game for the first time since week 7 of last season against this Tampa Bay secondary. You're going to see Brock Purdy coming out firing. He's going to have his first 4 touchdown performance of the season. He's going to pass for over 300 yards, and he's going to pass for 4 touchdowns. Your guy, George Kittle, will catch 2 of them, and one of them will go to Christian McCaffrey in his first game back. The fourth one, either Ricky Pearsall or Juwan Jennings. I haven't made up my mind, but I think it's going to be Pearsall coming out of a bye, gets his first NFL touchdown catch. And I think the story of the game is going to be Brock Purdy is locked in. You talk about teams getting injured. The 49ers are actually, they lost Brandon Ayuk, but they're getting back Christian McCaffrey, and they're going to get back Juwan Jennings. So they're getting healthier at the right times with certain spots. And no 2 players have been like more carrying themselves in terms of efficiency than Christian McCaffrey and Brock Purdy. Ever since Brock Purdy took over at quarterback, McCaffrey was always a machine. His game's even better. And I think that San Francisco would not bring back Christian McCaffrey if they were not planning on using him in a full workload. So I think you're going to actually see him go for 20 PPR points as well.
Best timed bye week ever. Ever. You had George Kittle banged up. You had Deebo Samuel with pneumonia, and those were the receivers they had left. Now they get McCaffrey back. Now you get Ricky Pearsall getting more integrated into the offense. You get the return of Juwan Jennings, and you have Kittle and Deebo as healthy as they've been all year going against the Buccaneers. What does that mean? Brock Purdy. Fantasy points for Brock Purdy this week. Don't bury the lead. Play Brock Purdy and enjoy.
I love it. I'm stoked for that one. Matt, what do you have up next?
There is a particular wide receiver who has performed well, especially last week. But the question is, well, can this continue? Well, there's more target competition coming back to the lineup. He's been very volatile. Does this player have real breakout potential for the full year and for his career? Is this real? Is this player for real? And my bold prediction, not only is Jackson Smith-Njigba for real, Jackson Smith-Njigba has passed DK Metcalf as the primary option in the passing game for Geno Smith. Jackson Smith-Njigba is number 1 in slot snaps. Jackson Smith-Njigba is top 5 in the NFL in both routes run and targets. 75 targets already this year for Jackson Smith-Njigba. Meanwhile, DK Metcalf has not been a top 12 wide receiver 1 in fantasy since 2020. It's been a consistent period, year over year over year, of DK Metcalf disappointing fantasy gamers and his play eroding. Meanwhile, Jackson Smith-Njigba is surging. He is thriving in the slot, and there's no reason to think it's not going to continue even once DK Metcalf returns.
I love it. And the two of us were very bullish on JSN all offseason long. We were bullish on him when he was a prospect. And Matt, we're never wrong. We just sometimes have to be patient because you're finally seeing the JSN breakout like you want to see. Matt, he averaged 25 yards per reception last week, and he had 2 big plays called back as well. How do you put that back in the box? And this is not the Pete Carroll era where they're going to keep going back to things. I think like Ryan Grubb is a forward-thinking, innovative offensive coordinator who's going to go with what's working. And this is something where the offense could really change and be JSN focused for the rest of the season. I love how JSN's is looking, not only this week, but beyond. And another wide receiver who the two of us have been very high on over the years is George Pickens. And George Pickens has really been maybe the most unlucky player in fantasy football. All of the metrics are there. You're talking about a player who is averaging a 28% target share. He's sixth overall in air yard share. He is top 10 in end zone targets. Everything is shaping up for Pickens to have this monster season. And Matt, he's top 7 right now in deep targets as well. So like everything is there. The Pittsburgh Steelers added Mike Williams during the trade deadline. And I think this actually is going to help the entire offense to add another big body opposite of Pickens. Pickens right now only has 1 touchdown catch all season long. And Pickens is wide receiver 36 overall, 11.6 PPR points. For the rest of the season, George Pickens is going to put up top 10 wide receiver numbers. He's going to average 18 points per game for the rest of the way, and you're going to see some actual spike weeks. And there's a couple games coming up, Matt, where Russell Wilson, we've seen him play well twice. Nothing revolutionary, but the passing game looks solid with Russell Wilson. I think Pickens makes a statement this week against Washington, and you're going to be thrilled to have him for the rest of the season. If there was ever a buy low, it's George Pickens.
Yeah, I mean, this is the perfect situation where they're at Washington, they're facing Washington, yet they're underdogs, right? You have a 45, 46-point total, and this could be a shootout. It really could be. Now, the Washington defense, playing a little bit better, but I think, if anything, they shut down Najee Harris, and the way that they can be competitive in that game, George Pickens. Now, there's a running back on a bad team, which is the theme of my bold predictions this week. Another running back on a bad team, Tony Pollard. All Tony Pollard does is score fantasy points, and yet doesn't get the respect, doesn't get ranked as a top 10 running back in any context, weekly rankings, season rankings. You don't see it. But Tony Pollard is going to be a top 10 running back the rest of the way. The idea that Tajay Spears is going to cannibalize touches from Tony Pollard is over. It's not going to happen. Julius Chestnut is not a problem. Mason Rudolph is a good thing. He has upgraded the offense, more touchdown equity for Tony Pollard. So Tony Pollard is top 10 in carries, top 10 in targets, and number 5 overall in weighted opportunities. He's just not getting the touchdowns and not scoring fantasy points the way that the opportunities and his efficiency numbers suggest that he should. We have a metric for that on playerprofiler.com. It's called expected fantasy points. And Tony Pollard is number 6 among NFL running backs in expected fantasy points per game, but his actual fantasy points ranks number 19. There will be a reversion to the mean, a reversion to the expectation, and he will be a top 10 running back the rest of the way. Keep starting him, even though you don't love the matchup, you don't love the offense, because he's getting all the touches. He is a must start, and he will deliver.
No, I love it. And I think Tony Pollard's a real value right now. And again, that's the entire offense. Getting Tony Pollard the ball is really been the most reliable thing in Tennessee all season, and it will continue to be the most reliable thing. I'm going to go a little bit higher up. Another player, Matt, who we've been high on over the years, and I'm certainly synonymous with hyping this guy, but it's Devon Achane. And Devon Achane, like, anybody could sit here saying, yeah, this guy's going to be a top 5 back rest of the season because the metrics are completely there. Ever since Tua Tagovailoa came back, Devon Achane has been the biggest beneficiary in Miami. 27 points in week 8 and 32 points in week 9. But Matt, it's really the maturation we've seen with him as a receiver, where he's had nearly a 30% target share over these past 2 games with Tua. 8 targets in both of them, incredibly efficient as a receiver as well. And they're lining him up in the slot, not just sometimes, but quite often. This is a player that is multidimensional, explosive, and they're getting the ball in his hands. He has more receptions than Breece Hall on fewer targets and 1 fewer game this year. Breece Hall, of course, led the NFL in running back receptions last year. My prediction is Devon Achane ends up leading all running backs in receptions, and I think he's going to do it by close to double digits. I think he's going to have, which is a huge step, Right now, he's trailing. He's trailing Alvin Kamara, who's the leader, and then Bijan Robinson is number 2. And for me, it's Devon Achane's going to catch both of these guys because of momentum and because he's played one fewer game. So Devon Achane has 37 receptions. Kamara has 46. At the end of the year, Devon Achane will lead all running backs in receptions ahead of every other running back in football. And Matt, what a massive development for a player that we know is explosive, we know is elusive, we know was incredibly efficient as a runner in year one. It's like Devon Achane is really, truly a unicorn for us in fantasy football in terms of his production and now his maturation in terms of his receiving work.
What do I say to that? He
Nothing.
is a unicorn.
Just get excited. Just get excited.
He is a unicorn. But you know who else is a unicorn? Josh Downs. Josh Downs is 5'9", 170. Josh Downs is tiny. Josh Downs only runs a 4.48. His athleticism suggests he's Wan'Dale Robinson, but the metrics say something completely different. He was an absolute mega producer as a sophomore at the college level, and now this year, look at the advanced metrics in the opportunity row on playerprofiler.com. Number 6 in targets per route run. And Michael Pittman is not the same caliber receiver. He's simply a better receiver than Michael Pittman. He is the wide receiver 1, and now he has a quarterback who is a true pocket passer who's never a threat to run the ball. You're going to maximize the number of pass attempts in the offense because of that, and that will maximize the targets and the fantasy production for Josh Downs. He will be a wide receiver 1 in fantasy the rest of the way. Anthony Richardson has taken his final snap as an Indianapolis Colt. Anthony Richardson will be the starting quarterback for the Raiders next year if he can win the job. The reason why the Raiders will be rolling with Anthony Richardson is because Desmond Ridder will make it impossible for them to secure a top draft pick. Adding Desmond Ridder will turn out to be a mistake for the Las Vegas Raiders because he's too good. He is that Konami quarterback savior that so many in fantasy football are looking for, especially in 2QB and superflex leagues. You must get your hands on Desmond Ridder, and it's to the great benefit of the Raiders offense, but not the Raiders' future draft pick.
Yeah, and Matt, that's a great segue to my final one, where we're in week 10, and we're starting to think, like the two of us are always thinking about the NFL draft. We're talking about it all the time because of our incredible coverage that we have, Profiler, for all 3 days of it. But now it's start to talk about the teams that are actually going to be picking towards the top. And usually at this time, Matt, there's like 2 teams, 3 teams where we're like, it's going to be one of these 3 who gets the number 1 overall pick. This year, it's crazy. You have all these teams, 7 of them, with 2 wins. So there's a real run on who actually gets the number 1 pick. And some of these teams might actually be motivated to win a couple of games. Some of these teams want to tank. We don't really know how it's going to shake out. But the team that I think is going to be selecting at the number 1 spot, I know we just saw the New England Patriots get the win over the Jets. And I know we just saw the New England Patriots play a competitive game against the Tennessee Titans. But for me, it is the New England Patriots are not going to win another game this season. I think that when you look at the schedule and you look at their limitations, Drake May is going to be absolutely magical in terms of some of the plays he makes. And Drake May is a guy that we're very, very bullish on at Player Profiler. But the lack of quality in terms of pass catching weapons, the lack of quality in terms of offensive line, this is just like the levee's going to break, and they're going to rattle off a number of losses in a row. New England possibly wins one more game this season. They pick number 1 overall. And Matt, despite having a franchise quarterback, you'd say maybe they trade down. New England is going to stand pat at number 1 overall, and they are going to take Travis Hunter of Colorado as the number 1 overall pick. No quarterback goes number 1, and you get this dynamic, incredible two-way talent at wide receiver. If anybody hasn't seen Travis Hunter play, he's sort of like Garrett Wilson as a wide receiver, and he's also the best cornerback in the country. Where does he play at the next level?
He's like the Otani of football.
Exactly. He's the Otani of football. And Matt, this is one where like salaries I think will motivate this because the number one wide receiver is the number one wide receiver salaries are going to exceed what cornerbacks are getting paid. Cornerbacks are getting paid a lot, but it's not quite the same level as the elite alpha wide receiver. So I think we see Hunter as a full-time wide receiver that also will sometimes play defense, which is just insane. This is a player that we're going to get very excited about at Player Profiler, and let's really hope that he concentrates on the offensive side of the ball. I think he could be truly special, and you're going to have the Travis Hunter, Drake May connection. Travis Hunter's going to be a guy we're excited to draft next year.
The Patriots are at Chicago in Week 10. That's their chance to get a win. That's their chance. They're 2-7 in a 7-way tie for the 101 with 6 other teams that are 2-7. They go to Chicago. Then it's the Rams, the Dolphins, the Colts, at Arizona, and then they wrap up the season Buffalo, Los Angeles Chargers, Buffalo again.